Johnny Cage is one of the most underrated character arcs in fighting game history. A vain Hollywood actor who accidentally becomes one of Earthrealm's most important defenders. Today, I'm breaking down his entire story from beginning to end, starting with the tournament that made him realize his life wasn't actually a movie, the first Mortal Kombat tournament. So Johnny Cage enters the first Mortal Kombat tournament thinking it's basically a publicity stunt. He's a Hollywood martial arts star whose career is stalling because nobody believes his fights are real, and he figures, hey, mysterious deadly tournament on a creepy island, great press, or great material for his next movie. Here's the thing, it's not a movie set. It's a literal death tournament where the fate of Earthrealm hangs in the balance. Outworld needs one more tournament victory to earn the right to invade, and Johnny just signed up to stand between humanity and complete dimensional conquest, which is, you know, not ideal for a man whose biggest concern that morning was probably his hair, but credit where it's due, the guy can actually fight. His shadow kick sends him rocketing across the battlefield, leaving green afterimages. His force ball gives him ranged options most human fighters don't have. And then there's the nut punch, which somehow works on four-armed half-dragon men. He fights like a man who learned martial arts for real, but never stopped performing for a camera. Once the reality sets in and Johnny watches actual people die, something shifts. He aligns with Liu Kang and Sonya Blade, helping prevent Outworld from securing that final victory. He walked in as an actor looking for content. He walked out as a pivotal defender of the entire human realm. Not bad for a guy whose primary qualification was doing his own stunts. But if you think one tournament was enough to humble him, wait until Shao Kahn decides to skip the formalities entirely and just invade. The invasion of Earthrealm. Here's where Johnny Cage stops being a punchline and starts being a person. After the first tournament, he had every reason to go back to Hollywood, cash in on the experience, and never look at a portal again. He'd proved his skills were real. The tabloids were wrong. Mission accomplished, right? But he doesn't leave. He follows Liu Kang into Outworld for the next tournament, and when Shao Kahn launches a full-scale invasion of Earthrealm, Johnny is right there on the front lines. Not for a movie deal, not for validation, because the people he fought beside in that first tournament became his people, and his people were in danger. This is the era where his fighting style shifts. Less Hollywood stunt choreography, more guy who has watched friends die and adjusted accordingly. His shadow kicks hit harder, his engagements become less showy, more efficient. He's using his green energy and unorthodox tactics to stall enemies twice his size, buying time for stronger allies to land killing blows. The split punch still comes out, sure, but now it's a survival tool, not a flex, and then he dies. Motaro, Shao Kahn's Centaurian general, kills him during the invasion. Johnny Cage, the actor who thought Mortal Kombat was a publicity stunt 2 games ago, dies fighting for a world that still thinks his movies are fake. But here's the thing. When Outworld and Earthrealm merge during the invasion, Johnny's soul gets caught in the metaphysical traffic jam. It can't fully pass on, so it re-enters his body. He comes back. First death, first resurrection, and the start of a pattern that will define his entire existence across multiple timelines. This moment matters because it reframes everything about him. He's no longer the vain celebrity who stumbled into heroism. He's a man who died for Earthrealm and then came back to keep fighting. That's not ego. That's something else entirely. If you think one death is rough, wait until the Deadly Alliance gets their hands on him. The Deadly Alliance and the first death. Most people would take the win. You beat back an interdimensional invasion, watched your soul leave your body and come back, and somehow you're still breathing. Go home. Retire to Malibu. Johnny Cage said no thanks. After Shao Kahn's defeat, Johnny's soul ascended to the heavens. Mission complete. But the guy couldn't sit still. He watched from whatever afterlife lounge he was hanging out in as the fallen elder god Shinnok prepared another assault on Earthrealm, and went directly to Raiden like, "Put me back in. I'm not done." The elder gods restored his soul with one condition. He could only remain alive while actively protecting Earthrealm. The moment peace returned, he'd go back to being dead, which is, you know, not ideal. But this tells us everything about where Johnny's head is at. This isn't the guy who entered the first tournament for publicity. This is someone who tried peace and found it boring. Movies are the distraction now. Combat is the real job. He comes back fully matured, fights alongside Liu Kang and Sonya against Shinnok's forces, deploying the full arsenal with the precision of someone who has literally died for this cause before. Shadow kicks, force balls, everything. But then Shang Tsung and Quan Chi formed the Deadly Alliance. They systematically dismantled Earthrealm's champions one by one. Liu Kang and Kung Lao fell to the sorcerers themselves. Johnny Cage was cut down by the Deadly Alliance's Tarkatan warriors during the final assault. He went down fighting, but he went down. No realm merger technicality this time. No cosmic loophole. Dead. Full stop. And here's the meta problem. By this point, Johnny had died during the Outworld invasion, returned through a technicality, gotten resurrected by the Elder Gods, and now died a third time. The developers admitted this revolving door was exhausting. How many resurrection loopholes can you write before death becomes meaningless? The answer is 3. This cycle eventually convinced the team a full timeline reboot was necessary. Sometimes your storytelling gets so tangled, the cleanest solution is to burn it all down. But if you think Johnny's story ends here, wait until literally every combatant in existence shows up to fight over one giant fire god at the end of the world. The Battle of Armageddon. Here's something nobody really talks about when they discuss Johnny Cage's original timeline. By the time Armageddon rolls around, this man is no longer the guy cracking jokes on the sidelines waiting for someone else to call the shots. He's fighting alongside the forces of light. He's standing shoulder to shoulder with Earthrealm's greatest warriors, committed to what amounts to a last stand against the complete annihilation of every realm in existence. Let that sink in. The actor who once thought a death tournament was a publicity stunt is now a frontline soldier in an apocalyptic war, rallying alongside nearly every good-aligned combatant in the franchise for one final cataclysmic brawl. The Battle of Armageddon is exactly what it sounds like. Every fighter, every faction, every grudge, all converging on a single point of conflict centered around the fire elemental Blaze. Whoever defeats Blaze absorbs enough power to reshape reality itself. So naturally, the stakes are literally everything that has ever existed. Johnny fights in the thick of this chaos, deploying the full extent of his refined moveset, shadow kicks, force balls, expanded combo strings, all of it tuned to the more aggressive aerial combat system Armageddon demands. This is his martial peak in the original timeline, every technique sharpened by years of tournaments, invasions, and resurrections. But here's where it gets dark. It doesn't matter. None of it does. The forces of light lose. Shao Kahn emerges victorious from the carnage atop the Pyramid of Argus and proceeds to slaughter virtually everyone on the battlefield. Johnny Cage dies. Again, alongside almost every other combatant in existence. The forces of light crumble, evil wins, and Raiden, broken and dying at Kahn's feet, does the only thing left. He sends a cryptic message back through time to his past self. He must win. 2 words referring to Liu Kang, the one fighter who needs to defeat Shao Kahn, effectively erasing this entire timeline and resetting the clock. Johnny Cage gets something he never asked for, but arguably always deserved. A second chance to do it all over again, differently. But if you think a fresh timeline means things get easier for Johnny, you clearly haven't been paying attention to how this franchise treats him. The Rebel Special Forces leader. Here's the thing about Johnny Cage in the reboot timeline. He starts exactly where you'd expect him to. Arrogant, obnoxious, hitting on Sonya Blade mid-tournament like a man with 0 survival instincts. But Raiden does something that changes everything. He saves Johnny from Motaro. In the original timeline, that fight kills him. Motaro puts him down, roll credits on Johnny Cage. But rebooted Raiden, armed with fragmented visions of the future, intervenes. Johnny lives, and that single moment of survival rewrites his entire character trajectory, because surviving when everyone else dies does something to a person. After Sindel's rampage wipes out nearly every Earthrealm defender, only Johnny and Sonya are left standing. That kind of loss either breaks you or rebuilds you from the ground up, and for Johnny, it's the latter. Between MK9 and MKX, he quietly joins Earthrealm's special forces under Sonya's command. No fanfare, no movie deals. The guy who thought Mortal Kombat was a publicity stunt becomes a full-time operative, which is, quite the career pivot. But here's where it gets genuinely interesting. The reboot timeline finally explains the green energy stuff. Turns out he's descended from a Mediterranean war cult that selectively bred warriors to protect the gods. His shadow energy comes from an ancient bloodline designed to create divine-level protectors. And when his health drops critically low, those green shadows turn red, a state of heightened power that activates when he's pushed to the brink. Raiden theorizes this power reaches full potential when Johnny fights to protect someone he loves. His emotional bonds aren't just character development. They're literally the trigger mechanism for a god-fighting capability. The man is powered by caring about people. After decades of being written as the shallow one, that's genuinely elegant storytelling. He also becomes a father. He and Sonya have Cassie Cage, who inherits both his green energy and her mother's military discipline. They eventually divorce, but Johnny leans into the mentor role, training the next generation for threats he knows are coming. The arrogant actor becomes a grounded leader. The guy who wanted applause now wants his daughter to be ready for war, not because he enjoys it, but because he knows what happens when Earthrealm's defenders aren't prepared. But if you think fatherhood softened him, wait until you see what happens when Shinnok shows up and threatens everything Johnny built. The Netherrealm War. Here's the thing about Johnny Cage's arc up to this point. He started as a guy who thought a death tournament was a publicity stunt. He evolved into a soldier who followed protocol, but nothing prepared anyone for what happened when Shinnok decided to invade Earthrealm. The fallen Elder God launches a full assault with Quan Chi and an army of Netherrealm revenants. Johnny, now a committed Special Forces operative, fights alongside Sonya and the remaining defenders in what becomes the most desperate battle since Shao Kahn's invasion. Most of the champions are dead or corrupted. It's a skeleton crew holding the line against a literal god, and then comes the moment that changes everything. Shinnok fires a killing blast directly at Sonya, Elder God level energy, the kind that should vaporize a human on contact. Johnny throws himself in front of her, and his entire body erupts in green light. A full defensive aura, absorbing and repelling the god's strike like it was nothing. He doesn't just survive. He holds the line long enough for Earthrealm's forces to regroup and cage Shinnok, a human, tanking a blast from an Elder God, with a glowing force field powered by, of all things, love. Raiden explains that Johnny's Mediterranean war cult bloodline contains a latent ability that only activates when he's fighting to protect someone he loves. Not for glory, not for ego, for someone standing behind him who he cannot let die. The same woman he spent years annoying with terrible pickup lines is now literally the reason he can shield himself from divine energy. The writers took a character defined by selfishness and made his ultimate power source the exact opposite. His strength is proportional to his capacity for love. That's not just good character writing, that's thematically airtight. The containment of Shinnok buys 2 decades of peace. Johnny marries Sonya, has a daughter named Cassie, gets divorced because apparently saving the world doesn't guarantee marital compatibility, and raises the next generation's champion. Cassie inherits his green energy, and when Shinnok returns in a corrupted form, she activates that same aura and defeats him for good. The daughter finishes what the father started. Without Johnny surviving that blast, there's no Cassie. Without Cassie, Earthrealm falls. His entire emotional journey from narcissist to protector converges on one moment of self-sacrifice. He's no longer just a fighter, he's a legacy. The guy who once split-punched a 4-armed monster for a movie reel just became the most important human bloodline in Mortal Kombat's cosmology, which is, a bit of a career upgrade. But if you think Johnny gets to retire after tanking a god's blast and raising a champion, you clearly haven't been paying attention to how Outworld handles its politics. The Outworld Civil War. There's something nobody tells you about being the guy who punched an Elder God in the face. You don't get to retire. You get to watch your daughter walk into the same meat grinder you barely survived, and you get to smile about it. After the Netherrealm War ends and Shinnok is locked away, Johnny enters the most difficult phase of his life, not because the fights are harder, because the fights aren't his anymore. Outworld is tearing itself apart. Mileena is contesting Kotal Khan's throne. She's gotten her hands on Shinnok's amulet, and the whole situation threatens to destabilize every realm. Earthrealm can't ignore it, so the special forces get involved, and Johnny's right there in the thick of operations. But here's the thing, he's not the tip of the spear anymore. He's the guy making sure the spear lands where it's supposed to. His daughter Cassie is running point now, leading a squad of next-generation fighters including Takeda, Kung Jin, and Jaqui Briggs. And Johnny has to sit in that impossible space between I could handle this myself and she needs to handle this herself. Every parent who's watched their kid drive away for the first time knows that feeling. Now multiply it by interdimensional civil war. He's still dangerous. His green energy still flares, his shadow kick still connects like a freight train, and his experience gives him reads the younger fighters simply don't have yet. But his greatest contribution in this era isn't a combo string, it's judgment, knowing when to step in and when to step back. The tactical briefings and the moments where he bites his tongue instead of pulling rank. This isn't easy for him. Johnny Cage has never been the sit quietly and trust the process type. So, watching Cassie's squad take hits and stumble through missions he could sleepwalk through takes a kind of discipline no martial arts training prepares you for. The discipline of letting go. His marriage to Sonya doesn't survive this period. They divorce, pulled apart by different ideas about duty. Sonya stays married to the mission. Johnny stays married to the family. Ironic, considering 20 years earlier, he couldn't commit to anything longer than a press tour. But all of it pays off when Cassie faces a corrupted Shinnok at the Jinsei Chamber, the same elder god Johnny barely survived, and Cassie activates her own green aura, his bloodline, his legacy. She puts Shinnok down. That's not an accident. Johnny didn't win that fight, but he built the person who did. If you think navigating fatherhood during an interdimensional conflict is complicated, wait until you have to navigate a conversation with your own past self, because time is about to get very, very broken. The Keepers of Time. Paradox. Mortal Kombat 11 does something no other game in the franchise had attempted before. It takes the most developed version of Johnny Cage and forces him to stand in a room with the one person he hates most in the universe, himself. When Kronika begins merging timelines, she pulls past versions of several combatants into the present. Among them is a younger Johnny Cage, ripped straight from the Mortal Kombat 9 era, complete with every insufferable trait the older version spent decades grinding out of his personality. The narcissism, the casual sexism, the absolute refusal to take anything seriously. Older Johnny looks at this guy and visibly wants to crawl out of his own skin. Here's where it gets interesting. This isn't just a gag, it's a full psychological reckoning delivered through punches and one-liners. Older Johnny has to work alongside this walking reminder of everything he used to be, and he can't just beat it out of him. He has to tolerate it, guide it, and occasionally resist the urge to shadow kick his own past into a wall. The two versions fighting side by side illustrate something the series had only ever told us before. Young Johnny throws hands like someone who's never lost anything that mattered. Older Johnny fights like someone who's buried friends, raised a daughter, and failed a marriage. Same moveset, completely different intent behind every strike. One fights because he thinks he's invincible, the other fights because he knows he isn't, and the younger version starts noticing, slowly, reluctantly. He sees what decades of war and actual love have done to his future self, and begins to recognize that maybe growing up isn't the same thing as giving up, which is, not exactly a lesson most fighting games bother teaching. Johnny's contributions throughout the time crisis, fighting Kronika's forces, keeping morale from collapsing with gallows humor, all of it buys Liu Kang the space he needs to reach the hourglass. When Fire God Liu Kang defeats Kronika and seizes control of time, Johnny is among those who survive, again. Because apparently, the universe simply cannot kill this man permanently. Liu Kang takes the hourglass, becomes the new Keeper of Time, and forges an entirely new timeline built from scratch. Johnny's arc across this crisis, his survival, his reconciliation with his own worst impulses, feeds into the foundation of something better. But if you think the time games are over, wait until you see what Liu Kang's new era actually does to Johnny, because it strips away everything he's built and starts him over from zero. The new era action star. So after all of that, after dying multiple times, fighting an elder god, raising a daughter who inherited his powers, and literally meeting his younger self across a time paradox, what does the universe do to Johnny Cage? It makes him washed up again. In Liu Kang's new era, the Fire God takes control of the hourglass and crafts a fresh timeline from scratch. And in this new reality, Johnny Cage is once again a struggling action star. His finances are ruined. His ex-wife left him. He's bought a bunch of expensive nonsense he can't afford, including the Takahashi clan's sacred sword, Sento, which he treats like a prop from a garage sale, which is, not ideal for inter-clan relations. But here's what makes this version genuinely interesting. Liu Kang strips away the war cult magic entirely. No Mediterranean bloodline, no green divine energy, none of it. Instead, Johnny's power system is rebuilt around something called hype, a mechanic representing pure charisma, showmanship, and momentum. His abilities are now tied to being entertaining rather than being descended from god warriors. No safety net. And that arguably makes him braver than any previous version. The Johnny who fought Shinnok had a divine failsafe coded into his DNA. This Johnny, he's just a guy. A very talented, very loud guy who keeps choosing to stand between Earthrealm and whatever wants to destroy it, knowing full well that nothing mystical is going to catch him if he falls. Liu Kang recruits him alongside Kung Lao, Raiden, and Kenshi as Earthrealm's champions in yet another tournament against Outworld. But his arc this time centers on something he's never properly learned in any timeline: humility. His friendship with Kenshi forces him to confront what legacy actually means. He bought Sento like it was memorabilia. When he finally understands what it represents and returns it, that's not just a plot beat. That's psychological growth replacing mystical power as the measure of his worth. His choices ripple outward in quieter ways. Returning Sento stabilizes the Takahashi clan. His presence humanizes Earthrealm's delegation. He's not saving the world with a god-tier energy shield anymore. He's saving it by showing up, being competent, and slowly becoming someone worth respecting. And that's the thread connecting every version of Johnny Cage across 30 years. He starts as a joke, an egotistical Hollywood fraud who thinks death matches are publicity stunts. And every single time, no matter what timeline, no matter what powers he has or doesn't have, he finds his way to the same destination. He becomes someone who fights, not because it makes him look good, but because people he cares about need him to. The details change, the magic changes, but the man keeps choosing the same thing. And that's why Johnny Cage remains one of the most essential characters in Mortal Kombat. Not because he's the strongest, but because he's the guy who wasn't supposed to matter, and decided to matter anyway. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.